Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is of Samuel Fuller's The Naked Kiss from 1964, starring Constance Towers. This is Criterion Blu-ray spine number 18, and it has one of the more colourful Criterion covers, and it also has one of the most colourful Criterion booklets of the opening scene. It has the usual essays in here. The extras has a video interview from 2010 with Constance Towers. There's an excerpt from the South Bank show from 1983 dedicated to Sam Fuller. There's an interview with Sam Fuller from 1967 on French television. And an interview from 1987 with another French TV show with Sam Fuller. My favourite Sam Fuller film's always been Pick Up in South Street with Richard Widmark. I think I'd seen The Naked Kiss a long time ago, and I'd kind of forgotten most of it, apart from the opening, obviously, because that's fairly unforgettable. But watching it again on Blu-ray, it just blew me away. The Blu-ray really takes advantage and shows off Stanley Cortez's cinematography, which is absolutely beautiful, especially scenes later in the film. It absolutely blew me away this time. So much so that if I do next year's favourite 150, there's a chance that The Naked Kiss gets in. It's an amazing film on so many levels. Obviously Sam Fuller was a bit of a renegade, a bit of a guerrilla filmmaker. Started off working kind of the tabloid press, so this is a kind of lurid, has a kind of sleazy feel to it. It goes to very dark places, which I'll get to later. Constance Towers should have got the Oscar as far as I'm concerned. It's one of the best female leading roles you'll ever see. It's an amazing performance. The opening scene, which is pretty famous, is literally just a handheld camera and her swinging her purse at the camera as she's beating her pimp up. She is a prostitute at the start of the film to get the $75 that she's owed. You know, she takes out the $800 that he has and just takes what she's owed, which gives you a kind of hint of the kind of person she is. But then she has to get out of town, so she comes into this small town trying to rehabilitate herself, trying to start again under the guise of being a champagne saleswoman. She meets this guy called Griff, who happens to be a police officer, and she turns a trick with him, or for him, and then he takes an instant disliking to her, tries to get her out of town. She gets a job as a nurse helping on an orthopaedic ward for kids. Again, this film is so bizarre. It's just so wonderfully off kilter. You know, if other people had made it, it would be a kind of bog standard story. But Fuller just has so much style and pizzazz. Like I said before, the cinematography by Cortez is absolutely beautiful. There's wonderful compositions by Fuller. who doesn't get enough credit for actually being a pretty stylish director. I mean, it has the word cult written all over it. For what it was trying to do in 1964 and the subject matter that's about, it's a really ballsy film. Again, Constance Towers is really ballsy as well. She becomes a kind of voice, a sounding board in the community. She tries to protect. There's a student nurse who kind of gets potentially groomed by Candy, who runs this kind of basically a club / brothel, and the student nurse gets involved and gets $25. The girls there are essentially like bunny girls, but obviously they don't use the term bunny girl because they'd probably get sued by Hugh Hefner. So she goes to see Candy, played with Virginia Gray, who's the madam, and there's a wonderful scene where she takes her to the office and beats her up. She uses her purse this time, and then stuffs the $25 in her mouth. Yeah, in her mouth. I was going to say somewhere else, so she stuffs it. Again, it's just another wonderful set piece that's in this film. I mean, the film's not perfect. You know, it has a couple of lulls, but there's so much great stuff in it. The dialogue is just so good. It almost has that Sweet Smell of Success kind of dialogue, just that acerbic, bitter, acidic kind of tone to the dialogue. Candy says later, nobody stuffs dirty money in my mouth. And then things happen. Her position in the town becomes tenuous. She meets this rich guy who's in town, and they kind of fall in love, and then wedding bells are rung, but it doesn't quite work out, and she becomes a target for the police and the town in general as her history is exposed. And I can't really talk about the film without going into spoilers. All I would say is, if you haven't seen it, go see it, because it's amazing. It's so modern. I mean, if they made it now, it would probably get into a bit of trouble because people would think it's too much, and they made this in 1964. I would highly recommend it. If you like your films a little bit off, then The Naked Kiss is wonderful. Again, it just has that strange off-kilter atmosphere. The performances are great. Constance Towers is absolutely mind-blowingly good. It's just a woman who's desperate to change her life. She has a great speech to the young nurse who may get on the game, about what it's going to do to you, what it will do to you mentally and physically. It's just an amazing speech. There's so much great dialogue in it. Again, like I say, it's beautifully shot by Stanley Cortez, and the Blu-ray really shows you that. Beautiful compositions by Fuller. There's a great song in the middle when she's doing a performance with the little kids on crutches. It just has some beautifully surreal moments, and it's just fantastic. The opening scene is amazing. The title sequence is amazing. It's full of wonderful images. It's just fantastic. So I'm going to go to spoilers now. So if you haven't seen the film, switch the video off, go watch the film and come back, or don't, it's entirely up to you. But I would highly recommend The Naked Kiss. It absolutely blew me away after not seeing it for years and years. It's just phenomenal. It's right up my street as far as tone and just oddness. So that being said, I'm now going into spoiler territory. So she's about to be married to this character who, I can't remember the actor's name, but he kind of looks off himself. He's kind of too polished and he just looks a bit strange. But the whole reason that he wants to get married is essentially to provide a cover because he's a paedophile. And Constance Towers' character, Kelly, I should have actually said her character's Kelly, but apologies for that. Kelly discovers this. She brings her wedding dress to his house, and it's just a beautiful scene that, again, in 1964 they obviously couldn't do a lot of explicitness about child molestation, strangely enough, but it's so beautifully done. It's almost expressionistic, the way she discovers his dark secret. She comes in, she looks at the box, she sees something, we can see that she's seen something, and then a little girl runs out of the darkness and then runs out the house, and then her fiancé comes forward, gives her this amazing speech about how, you know, she's abnormal and he's abnormal, and, you know, she would be the only woman that he could marry because, you know, they're both abnormal. And she ends up clubbing him to death with a telephone, and her veil from her wedding dress just floats down across his face as he's lying on the floor, which is just a beautiful touch. And again, we have a kind of medium shot of that scene, and it's just a beautifully composed image. I would love to pause that and get it printed and put it as a painting, because it's a beautiful tableau. But because of her background, the Griff character, the cop, because her fiancé is a rich guy, they obviously don't take the side of the ex-prostitute, so she gets thrown in prison. And again, there's just wonderful compositions by Fuller and Cortez. The black and white cinematography is absolutely beautiful. So she just gets piled on and piled on. All these witnesses turn up. I mean, they drag her ex-pimp up, and he obviously says she stole $800 from me. And of course she's like, no, I only took $75, which is what I was owed. She tells of how he was going to throw acid in her face. You know, this is a really dark film. And again, so it's so ballsy. It's absolutely fantastic. And then the student nurse, who kind of gets groomed by Candy the Madam, she denies that ever happened as well. And then Candy, again, a really sleazy, great performance by Virginia Gray as well. She comes up saying, oh yeah, Kelly wanted to blackmail the guy, you know, she's no good. And of course they're believing her, and you do actually get upset for her because you're completely on her side. As soon as the film starts and she's beating us across the face with her purse and handheld camera, you're instantly on her side. Again, that beautiful little touch of her only taking $75 out of the $800 from the get-go tells you what kind of person she is. And as we follow her through the film, you're completely on her side. And personally, I was getting drawn in and I was getting upset because it just looks like so bleak as all these people are piling on her. that she's going to get done for murder. You know, they think the wee girl that she saw, because she can't really describe her, they think that's a figment of her imagination, and this guy could never do that, you know, because he's rich and popular. So you just have this terrible dread that she's going to get executed, because they get piled on. Because this is Sam Fuller, you know, you don't necessarily think, oh, don't worry, it'll all work out and it'll be a happy ending, because Sam Fuller was a realist. He wasn't a hopeless romantic or anything like that. But eventually, you know, the student nurse has a crisis of conscience, and she goes back to Griff, the police officer, and actually tells him the truth. And then Kelly happens to see the girl, and they kind of, with the student nurse, they have a lineup of like young girls, which is quite odd itself. There's lots of scenes in the film that are just odd and off, but that's what makes it so wonderful. It's not a bog standard studio picture. Fuller's films are always pretty low budget. And then eventually she gets off. They realise, I mean, because Griff earlier has said, you know, there has been like a couple of kids molested, but of course, you know, you accusing this rich guy is taking the shine off the real assailant. But they finally realise when the little girl tells them what happened. But again, it's done really subtly. She only talks about a special game. It doesn't go into detail. Even though we know what's going on, it's just handled so beautifully and so well. Again, the film is nowhere near as sleazy as it was probably sold as, and what you might think. Constance Towers. Constance Towers says that in an interview, that her father wasn't very keen on her taking the job, you know, on the role of a prostitute. But then once he actually saw the film, it took him a wee while to actually see the film, but once he saw the film, he realised that it was actually a very good film, and it is an excellent role, and it's not exploitative in any way, because you do completely root for her from the get-go. And it leads to another bizarre scene when she walks out, and pretty much the whole town is outside the police station, and they're all like standing like the characters in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, as she's thanked by some of the women, and then she just kind of walks off into this empty street, and the credits roll. It's, again, watching it after all these years on a really nice copy, a really nice print, pristine black and white cinematography. It really did blow me away this time. The dialogue is just absolutely wonderful, and Constance Towers' performance is sensational. It's just a wonderful, wonderful film, and if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. So let me know what you think, if you have seen The Naked Kiss. Again, I might have to think about my Samuel Fuller rankings, because like I said, Pick Up in South Street has always been my favourite, but this one was just so good on so many different levels. There's so much going on in it. Again, just wonderfully off kilter. Great film. So thanks very much for watching this random review. Hopefully you'll join me in the future for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films saying farewell.